breathe. Three perfect words that articulate being Black in America for the past 400 years. This is the explosion of COVID 19 and Black Lives Matter, explained through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a theory about human motivation. Before we go further, I want to point out that in many cultures and traditions, the word breath is synonymous with soul or spirit. Air is synonymous with soul or spirit. So when we're talking about I can't breathe, we're talking beyond the physical ability to breathe, and we're talking about the ability to have a soul or a spirit that thrives. This disturbing image has caught so much attention because what are we looking at? We are watching a man with his knee in another man's neck as he looks down upon him, higher than him physically and in social status in the United States, hands in his pocket, watching as this man takes his last breath and contributing to wrestling his spirit out of his body. This image is the perfect metaphor for in America. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow was a humanist psychologist that created this theory about motivation. And what he says is that there's a hierarchy of needs. We start with the most basic needs. And once those needs are met, we can move up to social needs, esteem needs, and reach self actualization and transcendence, where we're able to be the best human being that we can possibly be. The needs on the lower tiers are more instinctual. It's inherently in us to try to meet these needs. These needs must be met in order for us to grow as people, right? These are the most basic needs. So we're talking at the lowest level: sleep, water, food, breath, homeostasis, sex, excretion, all the basic bodily functions. Notice that breath is the first level tier. Breath. On the second level, we have safety needs, right? So we're talking about security. We're talking about um, a healthy family, a healthy body, employment, resources, property, morality, the basic things for security. Because people want some level of control and order in their life. Sometimes in this level is where we're seeking safer neighborhoods to live in, so forth and so on. As we move up, we move to love and belonging, family, friendship, sexual intimacy. And when we start to get there, if we don't, and acceptance is also in that level. If we don't feel love and accepted, we're going to have a lot of depression and anxiety, loneliness. On our next level, esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of and by others, if we don't feel valued and like we're making a contribution and we lack self esteem, we're going to start to feel inferior, which of course brings along all of its own trouble, right? And then at the highest level, we have self actualization, where we lack prejudice, we have morality, we're creative, spontaneous, we can solve problems, we can accept facts. This is where we thrive. This is where we are able to be the best person we can be. What we're seeing right now is someone who was denied one of his basic rights, one of his basic needs, on the cusp of a worldwide pandemic. So we were already in a position where our security was threatened. We were already in a position where we were not feeling safe, especially as the Black community, because we're watching COVID-19 numbers rise. Many of us are essential workers. We are feeling afraid about our resources. We're feeling afraid about our employment. Maybe our employment is not steady. We don't know how long we're going to have that employment. We're worried about our family. We're worried about the health of our children. We're worried about the health of our grandparents, and we're risking ourselves every day. So in that state, we then watch a white man on top of a Black man with his knee in his neck, wrestling his spirit from his body and not allowing him to take a breath. That is the explosion that we're seeing right now. When we start to talk about people are risking their lives because of COVID-19 and they're organizing and they're rioting and they're coming together, they're not wearing masks, they're not social distancing, we're failing to realize that Maslow's hierarchy of needs tell us that the most basic need is for breath. We are being denied the most basic need. I can't breathe is all of us can't breathe. All of us are being denied breath. All of us are being crushed. So the safety need comes second. We're not worried about the safety need. We are trying to free our souls, and we're trying literally and figuratively to take a breath. Now, as a community, before these two instances occurred at this point in time, as a community, we are still always struggling at the first two tiers. Are our physiological needs being met? Are our safety needs being met? We have a long history of structural racism in the United States, which makes it difficult to have all the physiological and safety needs being met. We have a long history of distrust for police and distrust for the government, and for very good reason. So if those needs are not being met for a community of people, that same community of people is going to struggle in all the other areas. They're going to struggle to contribute in the best way they can and be the best person they can. That's what we're seeing. Maslow's theory states that the longer a person's basic needs are not met, the more motivated they will become to meet those needs. That is the violence, the riots, those basic needs have been suppressed for hundreds of years. And people are very motivated to finally meet their needs. We know that the longer a person goes without air, the harder they fight for breath. The essential workers have been on the front lines during this entire COVID-19 pandemic. You cannot have people on the front lines and not feel accepted, appreciated, valued. You can't have people on the front lines driving the foods to the grocery store, driving for public transportation, taking care of people in nursing homes and in hospitals, and then allow somebody that looks just like them to be murdered in broad daylight. This is the explosion. It's not the first time in our history that we've rebelled. We can go back to the 1800s and Nat Turner's rebellion. Slaves knew that they were going to die. They knew it was going to be a bloody uprising, but they were prepared to die once again to have their rights met. What's interesting about the Nat Turner rebellion is that it destroyed the white Southern myth that slaves were actually happy with their lives or too docile to undertake a violent rebellion. I feel like the explosion of COVID-19 and the murder of George Floyd is a similar circumstance. We are letting the world know we've had enough, and we will rise up, and we will risk life and limb so that we can breathe. The Montgomery bus boycott, similar circumstance. When I was 12, I got to spend the day with Miss Rosa Parks. She came to our school and I was ambassador for her. And during lunch, we were together and I asked her, of course, I'm sure which a million people have asked her, what happened on that particular day that you took that course of action? And, she was just a beautiful spirit and said, I was tired. I didn't plan on it that day. I was just tired. This is also not the first time we've watched a Black man lose his ability to breathe and be strangled to death in the public eye and saying over and over again, I can't breathe. Eric Gardner died in a similar way in 2014, uttering those same words. So now that we know exactly what's going on right now, I think it's time to look at how do we make things better? How do we fix things? Let's take a look at what does wellness, what does taking a breath look like for Black, Indigenous, and people of color? We need to learn what that looks like. We need to learn what people need. We have to take a look at where we came from. We need to know how we got here. I think that's one of the biggest problems is that people don't really know how we got here. A lot of people like to think there are excuses for everything. The past is in the past, but we have to talk about historical trauma or what's also known as intergenerational trauma, how what has happened in the past affects us today. And we have to talk about structural racism, how there's a systemic racial issue within the United States. And we have to talk about how to heal. What does collective healing look like? In the end, We will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you have an interest in learning more about how to solve the issue of racial injustice in America, please visit my website at healhistoricaltrauma.com or send me a message, healhistoricaltrauma@gmail.com.